Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. Boy, have we got an adventure of our lifetime today. I mean to be telling you, well, hold on, I gotta do this real quick, and then okay, now I feel better. I had to be in my normal position or place. I don't know if I can even say position on this show, but today we've got Rochelle.
Yes.
How are you?
I am pushing through. I'm going through it, but I am so happy to be here, and I am light as a feather today. So,
Well, I'm so glad. Would you like to introduce our guest for
I would
today?
love to. So today we have Tash Doherty joining us, or Dartree. She has a website called miseducated.substack.com and does what some may say is a little bit out of the ordinary type of work. So welcome, Tash. How are you?
Hi, Rochelle and Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So you decided at one point in time that you were going to create a blog and you were going to write, and you've got a book out, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Mhm.
What decided you to pick the topic that you picked, which is all about, dare I say it, sex?
Mhm. Well, I started out actually being very passionate about women's health. So I was writing about birth control, interviewing different women about their birth control experiences. And then as I was going through a really amazing writing class called Unmute with Anne Randolph. And in this writing class, you get all of these amazing prompts to write about whatever is on your mind. And so somehow I ended up getting in the direction of more of my intimate relationships and all of the stories that I had around that. And I, for some reason, seem to be missing a screw in my brain. And I'm not quite as shameful about a lot of these things as other people. And I think that's because I grew up in a really intense academic environment in London. That's where I get my accent from. And, going to these private all-girls schools, everyone was just polishing their perfect red shoes. And we had so many rules that really I always just thought all of these rules were created by humans, and humans are imperfect. So all rules are imperfect anyway. And I just was like, let's break some rules. Let's write about topics that not many people talk about, but that everyone experiences. So that's what led me to start writing about my intimate relationships on the internet.
Wow.
Well, and I have to tell you, you need to go to her website, which again, Rochelle, is
Her website is miseducated.substack.com.
Yes.
apparently I missed the part in college where you had naked parties. Apparently now way back in my day, nobody did such things.
Right. Well, that actually was more of a dare that I got because I was in a fraternity and I had heard that, the students in years above us were so much more wild and liberal and crazy. So I was like, well, I think that surely the craziest days are here and now, which was the time when I was in university. So that's what inspired me to host the Naked Party. That's actually one of my most popular articles, and I get a lot of different traction and ideas. But it's also based off of this really awesome event in Philadelphia called the Naked Bike Ride, which happens every September. And so it's a giant public clothing optional experience right in the summer, still when it's in early September. So it's nice and warm. And yeah, I would highly recommend going to clothing optional events. I think it's really important for people to feel comfortable in their bodies, and you just see a whole spectrum of what the human experience is. And that has encouraged me, I guess, to continue to write about these topics because we're all human bodies at the end of the day.
Very true.
Was there anybody at the party that you said, "Oh no, please keep your clothes on"?
No, I think honestly, there's, especially in Philadelphia, they have an amazing, like, I don't know, lesbian, queer, all different kinds of communities as well. And I think it's really important to be able to celebrate all of those people. Now that we're talking about more about that experience, I did end up dating a guy that I met for a couple of months. He was really cool. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, to say the least.
Well, we're talking with a couple of girls here, and so I can be frank and honest
Yeah.
about certain things that is a female experience that is not necessarily shared by men, and then and I would say this because women, there's a moment of truth when the gentleman removes his pants, there's the great reveal,
Right.
if you will. Then, and we don't experience that because we's got some pretty good idea what we're getting into before we get into it, if you know what I mean. And where you guys just like, oh, or oh my God, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, if you read my most popular piece on my blog, which is called How to Achieve O Equality, and it talks about pleasure for females especially. And actually, there's a lot of research that shows that the male parts are not actually that important to the pleasure of the female in general. So I think a lot of men can just rest assured that I think actually a lot of it is society and how society is making men feel about their members. And also, I was just having this conversation yesterday with my female friend, how even in the male bathroom, you're constantly like physically seeing and comparing your parts to other males' parts. And that's, I think, just something that's, created in society.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's I would say that's like puts a lot of pressure on men to like have your body be a certain way in a part of your body that you really can't control. And that's I think unfair. So in my article, How to Achieve O Equality, there's tons of tips for how men, women, all different kinds of people with different sexual orientations can please females in their intimate relationships. So very important.
What's interesting is that when I went to high school, and I played all sorts of sports and stuff, and it was no big deal for guys to take showers.
Mm-hmm.
And then now, my sons never did in gym or anything. They never took showers, and I guess it's because they didn't want. See, the biggest fear of when you were a teenage boy, and you're in a shower, and it's a gang shower with there's one little itty bitty teeny weeny thing that you don't want to have happen, because that will be part of your mystique for the rest of your life. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, Kevin, I think you have already provided so many beautiful examples of how male teenagers might struggle with different experiences. And so imagine I've just taken all of my version of those experiences and put them on the internet. So, and through different types of writing classes and stuff, I try to help people also explore these experiences, because I think it's important to understand where this, whether it's shame or anything like that and where that comes from. But I'm sure you wouldn't be alone to say that about your experience in high school in the shared showers of, locker rooms, etc. So yeah, very interesting.
Well, and the other thing was the other thing that was really paramount was you wanted to be proud of and you had gone through puberty and stuff, and so you wanted to be proud, but there were some of the guys that were slower in going through puberty, and so they didn't have hair in certain places and stuff, and that became a very negative thing for them, and especially around their body image.
Yep. It's actually really funny. I will just draw attention to my book for a second, because in this book, These Perfectly Careless Things, which I've written, there's a scene in that book where the 15-year-old female character sees the penis of, sorry, I don't know if I can say that word, sees the parts of Danny Watson for the first time. And basically, what is actually crazy is that this was based off of my personal experience of when I first saw the parts of a human male. And years later, as you're saying with this shared bathroom, locker room situation, I discovered that one of my sister's friends who went to school with the guy that this experience was based off of had also seen the Danny Watson character's equivalent parts. And we both remarked as to how large they were. And so it's crazy because like people do remember these things in their mind. And Danny Watson is out there in the world, you know, doing his business. But yeah, the first time I saw one, it was difficult because I really didn't know what to expect. And you maybe watch, you know, different types of videography, or you learn about it in school and you like draw the little names of the parts on the diagrams, but the 3D actual experience of these things I think is not really explored. And that's what I really wanted to put together in my book, was the first time, you know, seeing males' parts or experiencing, you know, menstruation, those kinds of things. And yeah, so I tried to not hold back with any of the topics that I cover to give the full picture of the human experience.
Rochelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of just thinking it's kind of the same way for females, right? Because we have the same experience. You know, you go in the locker room, you know, one of the girls is maturing much faster than the other. And then it's like, oh, you know, you either want to hide and it doesn't matter whether you're maturing faster, maturing slower. We all experience those same thoughts, those same feelings, the same comparison to each other. And I love how you just talk about when it comes down to this, we are humans, we're in the flesh, we're doing this together. And all of the experiences we have lead us to wherever we go. And I think it's huge too, because it can teach you so much about yourself. It can teach you about, you know, your confidence and what you expect and what you don't expect and what you need and what you don't really care about. Like there's so many aspects of it, I think, that can help you in so many ways of your relationship, mainly including loving yourself fully, and just being open to being honest and human.
Yeah, totally. And actually, I got the quote. The quote goes, "I owe to the public my portrait complete." And this is from a 15th century philosopher, Michel de Montaigne. He's this French guy who wrote the first essays, the first format of an essay style. And yeah, he basically was really famous and, you know, was the mayor of parts of Bordeaux. And then when he was like 44, he decided to retire to his tower and just spent the last 20 years of his life writing everything about his experience, you know, bowel movements and like intimate relationships and everything. And I really tried to channel that in my work as well, because if a guy in the 1400s, you know, can do it, then I can today as well. And yeah, that's where I got the inspiration from. Like the idea of the full portrait of a person is important to me.
Yeah.
And being a human, by the way, just so you know, it's messy.
Yeah.
Well, if we think about it, we look at babies and they're just so carelessly innocent and we don't think much of it. As adults, you have the same things going on. You're just taking care of it a completely different way. And being a girl is like going down a whole different path. Like the line between being man and female and where that kind of crosses, like a female will never really experience what it's like to be a male and live in that body and know how it is, as the same way a male won't understand. And I think a lot of that is pushed against men for, you don't understand women and this and this and that. Well, okay, but we don't understand them either. And so I think it's really important that we get to learn about these nitty gritty topics and what it has to do with one and the other, so that you can just have a more fulfilling life and fulfilling relationships that are wholesome. You know, there's not that judgment or insecurity, because in every relationship, I think it comes down to one of those two things. You know, you start a relationship with anybody, you share a room with them, you're sharing one bathroom, somebody's gonna have to do something that might stink at one point or another. You know, and it's like, why are we so critical of those things? Because even when people pass away and then we have to help them as they are a baby again, are you putting that judgment to them too? No, of course not. So why are we doing it in the middle of our life if we don't do it in the middle or the beginning and the end, you know?
That's a great question. And actually, I explore that a lot in my most recent article, How to Be Shamelessly Sexy. So basically, shame is actually experienced very differently between men and women. And I also quote Brené Brown a lot about this, because basically for a woman, the way that shame is manufactured is that you get it coming from all different directions in your life. You know, your parents have different thoughts, your siblings, your friends, and maybe your partners, they're all telling you who you are and what you should be. And then also the stuff that you scroll and see on Instagram. So that's how, you know, it's all about, really, I try to talk about shamelessness for females as getting away from all of these expectations of other people and really figuring out what you need and what you want. But for men, it's actually very different in the way that they experience shame, which is to do with weakness and how are you weaker than other people, you know, and like constantly having to prove to other people that you're not weak or you're strong or you're a man or whatever that means. So actually the experiences of shame is very different between men and women. And I mostly just focus on the female experience of shame for now, because that's been my own experience. But I do hope to focus on getting more of a male audience at some point as well.
Well, you know, I'd love to help you with that, but I don't have any shame personally. No, but you know, and the thing is, you're absolutely right, because there are guys that, and I'm thinking of one guy in particular that was in a trailer, and they were driving, and he started bragging about his conquest, and that when you're rich, you can grab them by the private parts and you can do anything you want to with it. And he was just bragging, and whether or not he actually did that or not, I don't know. But at the same time, there are women that get out there and they'll say, well, you know, it's just guy talk. It's locker room talk. These guys talk like that all the time.
Boys will be boys, you know.
Boys would that stupid thing. Yeah. And I would play football. We had 50, 60 guys in a locker room, and I never recall ever once a guy talking about his conquests, about all he'd done, because everybody knew he was a liar anyway. In stuff. So, but it really is interesting that, and I'm glad you've got this website up, because when I was young, things like menstruation and things were just not talked about. And so if you had a daughter and she was 12 and she came to you and said, I think I'm dying, because you hadn't had that talk yet. and so you're so uncomfortable with it that you're making her uncomfortable with it, when it's just a biological function. Totally. And you know, so I'm glad you've done this, because I hope that you can get rid of a lot of the misconceptions and shame around sex and stuff like that. And by the way, I didn't know girls pooped and it stank. I had no idea.
No, we don't. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm glad. Yeah, and I think that's what I try to do with my work, is just say, okay, look, I'm going to hold up my hand and say, like, I had this experience, you know. And it's totally fine that most people want to say anonymous in my audience, or and sometimes it can be hard to share these pieces with other people as well. But there's a lot of access to information these days, you know, with TikTok and all that. So I'm hoping that, you know, younger girls and people can get access to a lot of that information on the interwebs. But it's not always written from a place of love or self-love and acceptance. And that's what I think is very important. So
we need to take our break real quick, and we've extended, because this is a fascinating discussion. And so, Rochelle, would you like to take us to break?
Yes, and when we come back from break, talking with Tash Doherty, visit her website, which is miseducated.substack.com. I have a question for you about the beginning of this journey and some of the things that you learned that blew your mind away. So we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Oh, I can think of one that probably did. We'll be right back. At 67 years young, I never thought I'd feel this good again. But thanks to Purium's Ultimate Transformation Lifestyle, to date, I've lost 37 pounds and gained energy, confidence, and a whole new outlook on life. This isn't a diet. Purium is a complete lifestyle change, giving me all the natural, organic, nutrition-packed superfoods that fuel my body, crush my cravings, and help me burn fat naturally, without starving myself. No gimmicks, no guesswork, just a simple, proven system that works. Superfood shakes, detox support, and real results. If I can do this at 67, imagine what you can do. It's your time to feel better, look better, and live better with Purium. Let's do it now, and let's do it together. Go to www.positivetalkradio.net and click on the Transform You to get started. That's positivetalkradio.net. Transform You. And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and Brachelle. She is here. And would you pronounce your name for us, just so we make sure that we get it right?
Me? Tash Doherty.
Doherty, okay.
Doherty, yeah.
Doherty.
Perfect. And okay, Brachelle, I'm on the edge of my seat for you to ask this question.
Okay, really, I think what's coming to my mind the most, more than like your experience going through this, is what is some feedback that you've gotten or something that you've learned that kind of dove you into a different position or gave you a different perspective on the work you do?
Yeah. So one thing that's coming to mind is with my equality article again. I've had some of my friends and my friends' mums read that article. And even so, there's a whole spectrum of people that have read it. I've had people over the age of 50 who are divorced, who are trying to, spice up their intimate life in the next stage of their lives. And I've also had a family friend who was like 17 years old read it. And what's really interesting about that is that they all commented that they were experiencing more pleasure, which was amazing. But it really struck me with my younger family friend, because she was saying that her boyfriend was like pleasing her a lot in high school, and I just was like completely blown away by this, because I just remember experiencing, mostly in my intimate relationships in high school, like my pleasure was just not part of the equation, right? Because it's left out of the typical script of like the foreplay and then the action and then that's it, and then there's the big celebration for the male and then that's the end of the experience. But it's really the foreplay where everything is happening. And basically this girl had said that she had trained her high school boyfriend in, the way that her body was working. And it was really beautiful to hear, because I was like, wow, imagine if we could train all high school boys to do this. The world would be a very different place, starting from far more pleasure at a much younger age. So that was kind of like really when I thought, goodness, like my work is actually impacting the world in a positive way, and changing people's lives, one O at a time.
Well, I'd have to say too that it's almost like she started honoring that in herself, and he started to learn how to honor that as well.
Right. And men
that doesn't come into their head. Yeah, that doesn't come into their head in the moment. They're just like, oh yeah, get it done, And for us, we were like very in the moment, if you will, and we don't just check out, like, and we're paying attention to everything right then and there.
Yeah.
And so exactly. I think that's where the pleasure gets lost for sure, is because your minds and your energies separate. They disconnect in ways that you think you should be connecting. So I think that is really important, especially for people at a younger age, just to understand those things and not be so naive about it.
Yeah. And I think also the fact is that men want to please women, especially younger boys as well. Like these are also their formative experiences that they're taking part in, maybe with their first girlfriend ever. So I think it's a really beautiful thing. And yeah, I'm happy for them.
Did you guys ever see the movie When Harry Met Sally?
I think so, but like not in a way that I can remember.
Long time ago.
The cafeteria scene?
Yep.
Okay, I'll remind you of it real quick, and for our audience that may not have seen the movie or whatever. It was Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. I think it was Meg, and she and they were talking about sex, and she was saying, "Well, women fake it all the time," and he said, "No, I know," and Billy said, "No, I would know. I would know if you're faking it," and so she said, "Let me give you a demonstration." So she gave him a demonstration of what she would go through having an orgasm, and he and the lady down the row, who happened to be the director's mother or something, and the waitress was standing there, and she was taking her order, and she said, "I'll have what she's having," because, but that's a thing that used to, at least it used to be a thing where women and women would, to protect their fragile male's ego, they would say, "Oh, darling, that was the best thing I've ever had." And in the meantime, she was like, "Oh, geez."
No, it's incredibly and sadly common. And I kind of liken it to, imagine you're taking a spelling test and you've like spelt the words wrong on the test, but you get like a green check mark, 10 out of 10 anyway. Like, in what other life experience is it okay to get things wrong on a test? and then be told that you're great and amazing. Like this is just letting men down. It's disappointing for men as well. Trust me.
Yep.
Well, and every guy that I know, well, I don't have sex talk with many men, if you can imagine.
Right.
But my assumption is that we would love to be able to please our partner to the best extent possible,
Totally.
and that is our driving motivation. Sadly, when you're a teenage boy, sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, if you know what I mean.
Well, you can be trained. These are skills. And actually, this is a big reason why I also shared this article with men, because if you take the just general male population, their ability to give females pleasure is very low in general. So I would say if you are a man who's going to take an hour or 2 hours to learn how to do this, you're going to be at such a bigger advantage, compared to all of your friends in this specific department. That I think it's totally worth it. So
unfortunately, you can't share that with anybody. It's
right. Yeah, but you can just train yourself, with these skills, and then help us to achieve orgasm equality. That's the goal. Yeah.
And speaking of which, I wanted to bring this up because this is also a thing. There's a gal that I interviewed on the show long before Michelle got here, and she was talking about the fact that, first of all, women's parts down there are all different, and so it's not the same thing. And she actually had a what do you call it, a labioplasty or something.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she was talking about the fact that it impaired her ability to have satisfying sex because the doctor cut too many nerves in that area, because he was trying cosmetically to make her more attractive, and to feel better about herself, but she ended up not. So she's written books and went on a tour and all that kind of stuff. When are we gonna get out of the dark ages about stuff like that?
Oh my God. Well, this is a huge bunch of arguments that we have in the women's health and the femtech industry, because there's a lot of different things that like impeding these women's health companies from growing and these problems being solved, right? And one of the main issues actually is that you cannot advertise any kind of female health products. Like if you have, for example, a breast pump, right? Like any breastfeeding woman might want to buy that for her kids, but you constantly get flagged on Facebook and Instagram, Meta, whatever, to say that this is like explicit content and you can't actually advertise. Whereas male performative, medicines, whatever, as erectile dysfunction medication, those things you can easily, you can put pictures of cucumbers everywhere, but you cannot show a breast pump because that's explicit. So there's a huge problem as to why a lot of women's health companies can't receive funding and can't grow, because if you can't advertise, how is anyone going to hear about your products? So there's a huge barrier here that needs to be taken away by the algorithms of, Meta and all them, which I don't unfortunately have control over. But there are a lot of women that I know creating amazing women's health products that are solving all different aspects of, whether it's like menstruation, postpartum, clinics, and menopause, all kinds of things. But yes, so we need to invest in female founders and try to remove these ad blockers somehow on the algorithms.
You're right. I know it exists, but I've never heard an advertisement for something called Glide. Do you know what that is? Neither of you guys do. No. Jeff Foxworthy said this on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour.
Yes, please teach me.
It's a lubricant,
right?
And it's called Glide because it works and stuff. So I wish that we would be a lot more open and honest about stuff, because there are people that don't know about some of these things that then they are suffering in silence, or maybe painful, or there may be problems with it and stuff like that. And so again, that's why I'm so glad you're doing the work that you're doing.
Thank Thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's very important, and there's all kinds of innovations happening across the space. But as also another crazy statistic is, I think less than 2% of all venture capital funding goes towards female-founded companies. So, and women's health is even a smaller subsection of that. So we just need to invest in women in their businesses, and then the world will be a better place.
Yes, I agree, and I know we need to take a quick break, but I just want to throw out the fact too that Kevin had mentioned, women will go out and get these surgeries and men will do the same thing. We have all these things going on, but really what happens in the real world when we don't have to do that? Our bodies are our bodies. We should be loving not only ourselves, but each other. And you shouldn't have to go get any amount of surgery that is going to change your nervous system to look any sort of way. So that's honestly just so sad.
Yeah, it's tragic. Yeah.
And when we come back from this break, I'm going to ask both of these fine ladies if at one point in time when they were teenagers or whenever they started to get close to getting intimate and stuff, did you ever stop and say, wait a minute, you're going to put what, where? We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and my friends, Rochelle and Tash, and you guys are amazing. But I wanted to ask that because I've always wondered, and nobody's ever said anything, but it's like when you have the experience of seeing your, okay, I'll just say it. When you have the experience of seeing your first erection in live and up close, and you're saying you're going to do what with where, and is that something that you guys have ever run across or considered?
Yeah,
I'd have to say right off the bat, really, yeah, it's I tried to avoid that moment for as long as possible, and that's why I think a lot of people don't realize is girls are really interested in girls when we're young because we want to understand ourselves, we want to know what's going on, we're trying to compare. For me, I was a very late bloomer, so everybody was experiencing things. I'm like, oh my god, what is that? Like, how are you doing that? You're thinking about things I didn't even think about, and when it really comes to it being a male, it's a whole different thing. And I don't know about you, Tosh, I'll let you speak on this, but I think a lot of what I was feeling going through all had to do with how he was responding and reacting and how his energy was. If I could feel that he was insecure, it made me like, okay, never mind, go away. We're not doing this. So how was that for you?
I guess I'll speak to that exactly, where women, at least being raised as a female in this world, I was constantly thinking about how I could be a people pleaser, like, am I pleasing my partner? So I think that's what at least made me more attuned to my male partner's experiences. And maybe not the best in bed, but like decent enough from the get-go. And I think it's interesting too. I also had somewhat of I guess you could say an addiction to watching certain types of videography that is, illicit and explicit on the internet from quite a young age. And I think that's maybe where my interest, came from as well. And so I think from that, unfortunately, I learned the dynamics of like how our bodies were going to work together. But that also taught me a lot about the male gaze in the kind of intimate relationships and experiences. And that's a huge reason why I write the work that I do. Because I feel like the female lens is left out of that entire interaction. As I was saying, like the importance of foreplay earlier, it's like it's very important for the female experience, and yet in those videos and things, it's mostly just all about focusing on the male parts. So that's what I think is how we're going to achieve more of a balance if we think about, you know, pleasure from the female's perspective. But yeah, all of the scripts, even the word that we use to like call female parts refers to the inside tract of the female body, the part that is responsible for male pleasure, right? Whereas we have another term that's more general and refers to like the whole parts in general. Yeah, but that's not part of our lexicon. Our lexicon of like the way that we describe female bodies is in terms of their ability to please males. So it's a bit sad, but it's a male privileging of an all levels.
Yeah.
You know, you bring up an interesting point, because I have to laugh, because most male actors that are in porn, you never know who they are. You don't see their face. That's not the part that they're interested in talking about or showing you. So it could be the same guy just over and anyway. But it's an important aspect of you know, in your work and in your age group. See, when I was young, you had to go steal like a Playboy from somebody in order to get a look at girls and naked women, and that wasn't even a complete picture at that time.
Right.
So in modern day, has porn, do you think it has hurt? Has it helped? Has it helped educate and stuff in the proper setting? And what would you do if you were the parent and you caught your 15-year-old boy? And by the way, 15-year-old boys, that thing has a life of its own.
Yeah. Well, there's a really amazing woman called Cindy Gallop who's developed a website called Make Love, Not Porn. And the goal that she says is that it's not the problem that it's porn necessarily. It's that's how we've disseminated, you know, this kind of videography, right, and content, and it's being used as education because we don't have an alternative. So what her platform does is actually shows videos of real couples in the real world and the way that they are intimate together. So it's, you know, it is sex, but it's not real, right? And it's knowing the difference between that I think is important. So it's not the fault of pornography that's how we gain all of our education. So yeah, I encourage everyone to check out Make Love Not Porn, because they do. It's maybe in the category of closer to amateur, but it's still, you know, real. There's real couples who post their intimate experiences together on that website. And yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting situation. Like if I end up having a kid one day, I think, you know, especially as a parent, you've gone through your kid's entire life cycle, right? So, you know, you remember them then they were an infant and then a toddler and all these kinds of things. And by the time, you know, you can think objectively, a 15-year-old kid for sure is sexually active at some level. So I would just encourage them to continue to like do it safely, maybe read one of my articles so that they can please their female partners. And yeah, just make sure that they're using protection, I would say.
Yeah, and that is so important too, because the videography part of it, that's not about, they're not teaching you how to love, they're not teaching you about pleasing, and I think it sets such a wrong expectation, because then you know, boys will be picky about, you know, oh well, this isn't what that video showed, or you know, putting expectations on themselves about the situation going the way they thought, or the girl reacting the way he thought she would. You know, I think it's good to teach that. But obviously in the way of love, not without carelessness, which is, yes, a huge problem. So that was a good point.
Yeah. And it is acting at the end of the day. So people need to remember that as well. Like
not even real.
It's not real.
Yeah.
It's not? Oh, you know, times have changed so much. I remember distinctly when I was in 8th grade, they decided, and went to a Lutheran school and a parochial school. So what they did is they took the girls in one room and the boys were in the other room. And the 6th grade teacher got up there and he started talking about abusing yourself. I had no earthly idea what the hell he was talking about. It's like, I'm not going to slap myself around. I'm not going to. What do you mean abusing your? And he never came out with the exact phraseology or the words, because
Yeah.
it was kind of like, wink, wink, don't abuse yourself, boys. And it's like, what the hell is he talking about? I had
Well,
no,
that could be-
I was sheltered. I had no idea.
well, that's taken into so many references too, because you think about how, based off of the way you're raised, your sexuality kind of falls in line with that, what's right and what's wrong. And some people are taught, don't be curious, don't do this,
Right.
don't do that. And then when they live their whole life, they just feel lost.
Yeah. I even have a couple of my friends that I've met who have never had an orgasm, and they're like 25 years old. Yeah, I think that's also I guess it's a blessing and a curse, right? I'm just too curious and I explored a bunch of stuff and then I want to write about it and share those experiences with other people. So that I don't really have that problem myself. But I think, especially for females in that regard, if that is your experience, either because you can't like climax on your own or because you're, afraid, there's a bunch of different toys, basically. Like there's a big industry right now and there's a lot of more female founded toys as well. I have a bunch that I recommend on my website, but a lot of people need assistance from like mechanical devices to climax. So I highly recommend people check those out too.
Can I make an observation and you tell me whether or not it's true or not?
Mm-hmm.
I was more experienced than my wife was, but I taught her over time with the use of certain appliances and things
Devices.
to be able to become orgasmic, because she had no idea what it felt like and the process. And so can you make somebody, if you are open and honest and work with somebody, it's almost like a muscle. It's like,
Totally.
can you teach somebody how to make themselves or to basically become orgasmic?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of great teachers out there. And another great psychologist that I've interviewed is called Dr. Laurie Mintz. And she's a professor of human psychology at one of the universities in Florida. And she focuses on all these amazing kinds of things. Her book is called Becoming Cliterate. And I highly recommend it. It's on Amazon, so I hope I'm allowed to say that. But
Yes, you are. Yes,
I
you are.
quoted her and I interviewed her for that article as well. There's a lot of psychologists who are out there as well who focus on these different issues. But yes, it's very important.
You'd be amazed how many men have no idea what the clitoris is or how to find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And also women can also learn that about their bodies themselves. So it can be a team effort.
Well, and I was there was an advertisement on and it was just on. I was watching on the news channel on my cell phone, and there's a little device that women use, and it's kind of newer, but it provides suction for that particular part of your body that you can utilize yourself or with a partner, and it becomes it becomes a lot easier for somebody who has problems or doesn't understand or doesn't feel it the way others do. Are you familiar with such a device?
I believe it's called the Rose. There's a bunch of them probably, but there's one called the Rose. I actually don't have one of those, but but there's plenty of things out there on the interwebs that you can buy. Another great company is called Dame. It's a female-founded company based in New York, and they actually were part of the amazing campaigns that I've been talking about with the importance of advertising. So they would, publish some advertising with some cucumbers and then publish advertising for their own products on the New York subway. And they had a whole argument about the New York subway and whether or not they could put their ads there. So I think they ended up winning in the end, but it did take them a couple of years. So highly recommend Alex Fine's company, Dame, based out of New York.
Well, and there's such a bad view that's put over any sort of toys or anything like that. And a lot of times I think people think, oh, women specifically, there's something wrong with me. Or like I've never had an experience like that, or I've never felt that, or, like it's just like this always curiosity. And I love how you mentioned, like, you don't need somebody else to do that. And don't close yourself in and limit yourself to what you can or can't experience based off of your willingness to try, something else to help you or someone else to help you. It really just puts you in a box, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be bad. Like, it's not, like you said, it's an open topic. We're all human. This is what we're going through. So why are we not having these experiences and these topics on conversations, especially like even when it comes to menstruation and everything, your hormones, all around that, and to help not only women but also the partner that you're with understand what the hell you're going through, because your body completely changes all within that 1 week, and it kind of throws everything else off a little bit too. And just to have that understanding is so important, you know?
Yeah, totally. And another great quote by Dr. Laurie Mintz is, about these toys, right, being power tools, right? Like, we shouldn't feel guilty about using power tools. They just get the job done faster, right? So I think that's a very important lens because, it's like there's a lot of guilt and I would say shame around these topics as well. But ultimately, it's just about enjoying things. And I'm kind of more of like a hedonist in that sense, like just enjoying this time in this life that we have. And I think having a really strong and trustworthy intimate experience with a partner or also with yourself is just a really beautiful aspect of that. And we see romance portrayed in film and TV and stuff all the time. But when it comes to our actual experiences, like, how can we better communicate with our partners what we actually need? And how do we know what we need so that we can tell our partners what to do?
Exactly.
Lots to discuss.
I really wish that you guys would be more forthcoming with what works and what doesn't work, and what's great and what's not so great, and it would make our life so much easier, because we end up having to fidget around and try and figure it out, and then if you're not being truthful, it becomes it's terrible.
Yeah, well, it's self-knowledge is very important. So the more you know yourself, the more you can communicate that to your partners. Very important.
Yep.
Yes, indeed. And when we come back, I would really like to talk about the shame that's around sex, and the different people that are just they're never going to be open about it. How can we help people become? And you're working on it. How can we help people become more open about it and realize, it's a biological function? And by the way, a healthy sex life does change your brain chemistry, I've been told. I would love your answer on that one when we come back. So we're going to take a 30-second break, as it's kind of like a teenager. Never mind. We'll be right back.
Last week, Brandon met a girl on a dating app. One day after work, he finally found the courage to ask her out. No answer. He started to panic. Was he being too pushy? Maybe it was too...
Hey, sorry I didn't respond. I was driving. I would love to go on a date. How does tonight sound?
Brandon tried to play it cool, but inside he knew. A girl so smart, so responsible. She must be a keeper.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Rochelle and me,
Tash.
And we're talking with I do believe your website again is Miseducated. Do the whole thing, Tash.
Yes, miseducated.substack.com.
Say it a little slower. Well, we can always hear it better.
Yes, miseducated.substack.com.
Oh, very, very good. So, we are in a very strange time, because now there's videos that you can watch. There are other people that are saying if you watch those, you're going to go to hell, and and there's a lot of misinformation about all of that. How do you help people get through? And you're working to do it now. And how do you help people to get through all the misinformation that's out there?
Well, I focus on helping people be shameless in their lives. So my mission in this world is to help the world be shamelessly sexy. And for women, that specifically involves knowing what you want, believing that you deserve what you want, and then asking for what you want. So there's entire books probably that could be written about this specific topic. But as we've kind of discussed so far, I think having that piece of curiosity is very important. Starting out with it, being able to explore your body and also your partner's bodies and all the things that you do together. And then once you believe that, you've discovered the things that you like, then you have to have the self-worth to say, hey, I actually deserve to have these things. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have pleasure. And then the last component of that is, of course, asking that and communicating that with your partners. And again, going back to my article on orgasm equality, often what we can do is mimic the experiences of how we please ourselves with our partners, right? Like that's left out of the typical script of, intimate relationships between men and women, is the way that women usually please themselves. So yeah, those are the ways that I specifically focus on this. And I believe, in the state of the world right now, there's a lot that we can't control, but what we can control is within our little wheelhouse, whether that's in our communities, with our partners, with ourselves, and just making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and having fun. I think that's how we overcome these challenging times, and being less shameless about things, or more shameless even.
You just said it, is have fun.
Right.
Isn't that what it's all about? I had years ago, we were having a discussion with a couple of friends, a husband and wife, and she was saying that she went down on her husband on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And the other person that was sitting next to me, I can't remember who that was. I think it might have been my wife. Anyway, she said, I can't believe that you do that. And she said, well, what's the difference? And she had a real healthy attitude about it.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and giving him a back rub? It makes him feel good.
Oh,
that's very sweet.
And of course, the other person said, oh, no, I give him a back rub, but I'm never going to anyway. So, but that's, but that's, they had a real healthy attitude towards it. And I hope that your work is impactful enough for everybody to really get involved and to learn more, because it's so important.
Totally.
And talk about brain health. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Talk about brain health. How having
brain health. I mean, I should actually probably quote some better studies about this, but I would say there's actually some recently. I saw a girl. I have to figure out her name, but anyway, she was basically saying that she was pleasing herself over the series of weeks and months and with different frequencies. And when she was pleasing herself regularly, she personally found that she was a lot more alert and happy and healthy and functioning, basically. And I think it's a great way to, relieve stress in the day-to-day. I don't know. I think that's at least from my personal anecdotal experience. But yeah, I think the main issue, as well as the kind of what you were touching on, maybe with the story about the couple, is the importance of trust and vulnerability, right? Like you have to vulnerably ask and communicate what you want with your partner. And there can be a lot of fear and anxiety around that, whether your partner's willing to reciprocate, those kinds of things. But I think ultimately, being vulnerable means that you can get your needs met. And you might have a chance of having more fun and beautiful and enriching experience if you are able to communicate those things. But it relies on that foundation of like a beautiful and trusting relationship in order to get there.
Well, and communication and trusting each other and being open and things, because in your experience, are there a lot of couples that the husband will say, the only time we ever are intimate is when I ask?
Yeah, totally.
And that puts a lot of pressure on him and her, because she feels like she either needs to comply or she's got the power. She's got the power of the relationship. No, sir, not today. I'm tired. I have a headache. I'm not going there today. I have the power. How do you help?
I think Esther Perel has some amazing content on this. I think it's called the state of affairs. Oh no, her book Mating in Captivity. And especially I can imagine, I've never been married, and Kevin, you have more experience in this than me for sure. So maybe you should be giving advice to
I was married for 20. Like I say, I was married for 24 years. It was the best 6 months of my life.
That's a lot. That's a long time, and I have not been married for that long. So what I would say would a really, really great set of ideas from Esther Perel in Mating in Captivity. She talks about the difference between intimacy being safety versus the erotic, which is unsafe or kind of risky and scary, right? So when you're with your intimate, safe partner that you've been with forever and ever, they're not going to have that same kind of like spicy appeal because, I mean, some people get turned on by like their partner like doing the laundry or whatever, but for the most part, you need to feel kind of in danger, right, in order to have that erotic experience. And so, I really just recommend the book Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel, because she just really focuses on that and how you can get the erotic back in a very safe, beautiful experience and relationship.
I think it's really important. If you're married for a long time, there is a certain familiarity and lack of adventure that goes into it, because it's like, okay, Bob, you're doing the same move as you have the last 300 times. Can you think of something else to do, or maybe put it in a different order? I don't know.
Right. And so there's a lot of things that I don't know if she specifically talks about these things, but what's coming to mind for me is like, I don't know, a weekend getaway, or you could even like play fantasies, right? Or I'm imagining, which I think would be funny, is like, imagine you're like, you go to a cocktail party with your husband. Like I would go to a cocktail party with my husband, who I'm like maybe bored in my sex life or whatever. And we pretend that we're like having an affair, right? Like at the cocktail party, or we're like cheating on our other separate partners by like meeting at this cocktail party, right? Whereas you're just, doing the same shit that you were doing before with your male partner. So I think there's a lot of element of surprise and imagination, that you need, and creativity, which is very important. But I think, at least for me, with the goal of being, helping the world be shamelessly sexy, is to just get people curious in the beginning about exploring their own bodies in that way, and overcoming the guilt and the shame of that just with yourself before you transition to working with a partner. So
I think it's important too, especially because, like, excuse me, how you talk about like being shamelessly sexy and all these things that we practice and do. And I think a lot of the times when you get into a relationship, you get used to somebody, and that you've gotten used to yourself. Right. You've gotten used to your way of your rhythm and the moving and how things go. And we put so much of that on our partner. Like, are you still curious in yourself? Are you still willing to try new things? Like, if you're getting bored, are you willing to have that conversation with them and also ask them, like, how are you feeling? Because this is what I'm feeling, and you never know what the reciprocation of that does. But to build a healthy community with yourself, with all the little parts of you that kind of come in and make you who you are, and to be vulnerable enough to share that with somebody else, and not put any expectation on it. I don't know why that's coming to me so much, but we have all these expectations around this, and every single person is different, and you don't have to feel any sort of way about who you are or why you are that way. Be loving, be curious, and just maybe be careful about who you share these things with.
And that's why I explore shamelessness, especially for women, is defining these things on your own terms, because it can be an Instagram model that you see, as you're scrolling through your feed, or your mother is like guilt tripping you for like, if I'm wearing shorter hair, my mother will be like, oh, men prefer like women with longer hair. Like, you should grow your hair out. Like, those different messages that you're hearing constantly. You just need to like sit with yourself and reflect on your own experiences. And that's why I also like to teach sex writing, because it's basically about saying, imagine your first time or your best time, a summer love story that you had or whatever, reflecting and thinking back and saying, what did I like about that experience? And oftentimes the things that turn us on are not the things that we might see in a typical, movie or whatever. Like, sometimes, like, for me personally, it's like I look at a guy's hands and I can tell whether or not like I want to sleep with him. Like, it's weird stuff like that, that you wouldn't even expect. And so I think having that self-awareness, exactly. Having that self-awareness, I think, is very important. And that's how I hope we can beat back some of the shame for women.
Let's change in healthy ways.
Exactly. And by the way, men are easy. Women, they need to be romanced. They need to be caressed. They need to be taken care of. And stop being in such a friggin' hurry. So,
Agreed.
And by the way, Rochelle, give us your information one more time, real quick.
Oh, yes. So I'm Tash Doherty, and I'm the author of These Perfectly Careless Things, a spicy coming-of-age novel set in England. And you can see that's a link to my blog, my Substack. It's called miseducated.substack.com. And it's been an absolute joy to talk with you guys. And thank you so much for having me today.
Will you come back, please?
Yeah.
Whenever you guys invite me again, I'll be back.
Well, we'll just stay here because we're going to fix that right up. And I want to thank everybody. Rochelle, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Of course.
Joe.
And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin